I am 82 years old, and for 6 decades I was the pillar of a community, preaching about a heaven that I feared more than I loved. But on that Sunday morning, time stopped. My heart went silent for exactly 4 minutes on the cold floor of the sacristy. I died. And what I found on the threshold of eternity was not the stone tribunal I had spent my life describing in my sermons. I learned the hardest and most liberating truth. Religion is too small a box for the fire that is the love of Jesus. I expected a severe judge, but I encountered a Father whose gaze recognized me even before I could justify myself. I discovered that our great works are only straw, and that the only thing that shines in the light are the moments of genuine love that the world ignores. I have nothing left to lose and everything to share. I ask you to settle in and listen to this account with an unarmed spirit. If these words find an echo in your heart, I invite you to walk with us on this journey of faith by subscribing so our fellowship may grow. Leave your thoughts or your prayer in the comments as well. I want this space to be a place of true encounter. Stay with me. What I saw, you need to know. You know, we spend our whole lives building walls, brick by brick, rule by rule, and suddenly in a breath, we discover that the walls we built to protect ourselves are the same ones that keep us from seeing the sky. Pull your chairs closer. Come nearer. My bones no longer carry the weight of my voice as they once did, but what I have to say, it is lighter than air. What I'm about to tell you is not in the theology books I wrote, nor in the sermons I shouted from the pulpit for 60 years. What I'm going to tell you is about the day Pastor Elias collapsed so that the man could finally be born. I was 82 years old that Sunday morning, 82 years being the pillar, the straight posture, the suit without a single wrinkle, the leather Bible worn at the edges, not from constant use on bent knees, if I'm honest with you, but from being carried under my arm like a badge of authority. I was a man who knew every comma of the law, but deep in my chest, I had an icy fear of the lawgiver. I was in the sacristy. The mirror returned the image of a respected man. I remember adjusting my gray silk tie. The knot had to be perfect. The collar starched so rigidly it felt like a hangman's rope pressed against my neck. The air in there was heavy. It smelled of old hymnals, oak wood, and the cold sweat of my own spiritual exhaustion. I was tired of God, do you understand? Tired of defending a castle I myself had built to hide from him. I was rehearsing, yes, rehearsing. A pastor of 6 decades still rehearsing how to sound solemn. The theme that morning was the purpose of judgment. I had harsh words for the congregation, words about fire, about the scales, about the account everyone would have to pay. I was very good at describing a God I feared, but truly I did not love. I looked at the clock on the wall, 5 minutes until the bell rang. I was the master of time, the captain of the liturgy. But time, my dear ones, time is an illusion we only understand when it begins slipping through our fingers. That's when it happened. It wasn't thunder. It was an iron hook, a sudden jagged tear ripping through the center of my chest, climbing from my stomach to my throat. The air, where was the air? I tried to inhale, but it felt as if oxygen had turned into crushed glass. My lungs were empty sacs. My right hand reached for the side table where the silver communion trays were arranged. The metal shone, flawless, but my fingers no longer had the strength to hold on to anything earthly. I staggered, and the sound, oh, the sound was terrible. The silver trays fell, striking the ceramic floor with a metallic crash that echoed like 1,000 bells of agony. The grape juice, the symbol of the blood I preached about so often, yet understood so little, spread across the floor, staining the carpet, staining the hem of my perfect trousers. I fell right after. The impact of my face against the cold tile was the last real thing I felt in this world. The icy tile against my cheek, and the metallic sweetness of the grape juice spreading near my nose. There I was, the great pastor, the doctor of divinity, collapsed like a sack of old flesh among empty cups. And do you know what my greatest terror was? It wasn't the physical pain. It was realizing that in 60 years of preaching, I had built nothing that could hold me in that moment. My theology was a paper shield. I was a pastor who, upon seeing the gate begin to open, realized he had a mortal fear of his own Lord. I was alone, completely alone, with my hollow religiosity. I heard knocking on the door, muffled, distant. "Pastor Elias, are you all right?" It was the deacons. I heard the wood groan, shoulders striking the lock. They were going to break in, but their voices sounded like they were coming from the bottom of a deep well, miles away. The sacristy began to darken, but it wasn't the darkness of night. It was a thick gray fog that tasted like static and smelled like a hospital before I ever reached one. I felt my heart struggling, a tired bird beating its wings frantically against a cage of old bones. 1, 2, and then silence. A silence that was not the absence of sound, but an absolute presence. I felt something loosen, as if I were removing a heavy winter coat, soaked and filthy, that I had carried for 8 decades without ever complaining. That old tent, that 82-year-old body full of pain, medicines, and pride, was no longer my home. I was being evicted from matter. And in the last millisecond, before the light of the sacristy went out forever in my earthly eyes, I knew I wasn't just dying, I was leaving. The experience continues. The snap. It was like the sound of a very old violin string, stretched too tightly for decades, finally breaking. But there was no pain. What came next was the deepest silence I had ever experienced, a silence that wasn't empty but full, as if the very air had turned into a warm velvet blanket around me. I was still there, in the sacristy. I saw the fallen trays. I saw the grape juice staining the carpet I had protected so carefully. I saw the deacons break the door open. Poor Brother Samuel, eyes wide, stumbling when he found me lying there. I wanted to say, "Calm down, Samuel, I'm fine." But my voice was no longer air and vibration. I was above, floating near the oak ceiling, watching the scene like someone watching a play they no longer belonged to. The paramedics arrived. I saw the sweat on the young man's forehead as he pressed hard on my chest. I heard the dry crack of my fragile ribs breaking beneath his hands. Crack, crack. And strangely, I felt nothing, only a gentle curiosity. That body down there in the gray suit, It looked like clothing, old clothing I had just taken off after a long, exhausting day. And for the first time in my life, I felt light, free, shortened slightly only to avoid excessive repetition while keeping the full narrative meaning. The walls of the sacristy began to change. They didn't disappear, they became thin, as if the world I knew were made of gauze, and something far more solid and real was shining behind it. The smell of hospital and floor wax vanished. In its place came something I cannot describe in earthly words, like rain in the mountains mixed with crushed lilies, a freshness that seemed to cleanse not my nose but my soul. I didn't pass through a dark tunnel. Instead, I expanded, as if I had lived my entire life in a small dark room, and suddenly someone opened every window onto an infinite field. Time died there. Everything was an eternal now. I began to move, not with legs, but with desire. I was drawn forward not by force, but by peace inviting me. And then the horizon opened. No ceiling, no sacristy, no earth, only an immense ocean of light that did not hurt the eyes, a light that felt loving. And within that light, I encountered not a judge, but a Father. In that light, I saw my life, not as a list of sins and virtues, but like turning a tapestry over and finally seeing the beautiful side after staring only at the knots. My greatest sermons, gray smoke, but a forgotten moment, 1974, giving water and bread to a stranger on the roadside, shone like pure gold. And that's when I understood. The God I had spent my life defending was a small statue I had carved myself. The real God was a wildfire of love that laughed at my boxes. He did not want my perfection. He wanted my companionship. I was already loved, always had been. Then the presence spoke, not in words but in knowing. Not yet, my son. You have seen the beauty. Now go back and tell them the fear is over. And suddenly the light withdrew. The warmth vanished. Cold returned. Compression. Pain. And then I woke up in a hospital. The ceiling was fluorescent white. The smell was iodine and alcohol. My ribs burned. My heart monitor beeped like a hammer striking nails. A nurse saw my eyes open and cried out, "He's back. The pastor is back." But I was mourning something deeper than broken ribs. I was mourning the distance from home. Since that day, the pastor Elias, who preached fear, died in that sacristy. The man you see now only whispers about the beauty of the destination. Death is no longer a stone wall. It is a glass door, and I have seen what waits behind it. So listen carefully. Do not spend your life trying to convince God you are good enough. You are already loved. Before your successes, before your failures, before your first breath. Heaven is not for those who deserve it, because no one there deserves anything. Heaven is for those who allow themselves to be found by love. Live so that the only things you carry from this world are the moments when your heart beat in rhythm with His. Compassion, forgiveness, quiet kindness. Everything else, smoke. I have seen the light that calls us by name. Do not be afraid. The crossing is short, and what waits on the other side is the embrace, the music that never ends, the rest our hearts have always searched for. My eyes are growing heavy again now, but this time it is not exhaustion, it is expectation. The door is just ahead, and I cannot wait to leave it open for you. Peace be with you.